All financial support for this podcast comes from my patrons on patreon.com. If you'd like to join in with patrons, please check out patreon.com/DarwinGross. That's DarwinGrosse. Now enjoy the podcast. Okay, today I have the great opportunity to revisit a discussion with a friend. His name is Tony Rolando. You will know him as the chief designer and bottle washer over at Make Noise Music. I am such a fan of their work. They recently came out with a new product called Strega, which we are going to talk a little bit about. But since we last talked, when we last talked, the Zero Coast had just been released, and so a lot of new things have come out of Make Noise since then. And so we're going to touch base on all of those, as well as talking a little bit about Tony's personal work. So, with all that introduction gone, let's say hello to Tony. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm doing okay. Thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule to have the talk. I am sure you are swamped. You have this new product called the Strega that's probably just rolling off the production lines now, right?
Yes. Yep. I was just over there actually talking to production crew about some things just before this, actually.
For people who aren't familiar, why don't you give us a quick overview of what the Strega is?
Oh, okay. Well, the Strega is a small instrument in the same form factor as the Zero Coast that I collaborated, or I should say Make Noise collaborated with the artist Alessandro Cortini in developing. And the idea was to develop an instrument that was, it's unique within the Make Noise product line, I think, because it was developed for Alessandro more than anything else. So there was a certain amount of freedom that came with that because it could kind of stand outside of all the other circuits that we have and be kind of unique from them. So it was kind of a fun opportunity to explore some things that maybe we wouldn't usually do under the guise of, hey, Alessandro wanted this. So if this is upsetting you, you need to talk to Cortini about it.
That gives you a little freedom to do things, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
So it was an incredible experience. I mean, for one, I have been a fan of Cortini's music for a long time. And then additionally, I was lucky enough to become friends with him. And so it was cool to develop something with a friend who also just has such a strong vision for not just music, but also the instruments that he uses to create his music with. So, right. Yeah, this wasn't a case where we made something and then we said, hey, let's get Alessandro to endorse this or put his name on it. It was something where we spent 2 years going back and forth trying to come up with some kind of a instrument that we could both be excited about, and that also just spoke to his aesthetics while retaining some Make Noise aesthetics. So a lot of compromises, a lot of deals were struck, a lot of ideas were crushed, but also some ideas were conceived. So it was a long process purely because you had kind of two strong-headed people trying to create something together. It was a very fun process, I would say, because he's someone that I really like his music. So I really wanted to make something that he would be excited about.
Sure. That had to be a trip to be able to kind of like dive into his brain and try and pull out what he wanted for instrumentation. Now, yeah. I've watched a number of videos about the Strega so far. And if I were to like categorize like in the what is it, I would say that it's kind of a warped filter and effects processor. Is that a fair assessment?
I think it can be used in that way for sure. There is an external input. There's also a Strega voice, the tones, Strega tones and tonic controls are so you don't need something external.
Okay.
You don't need an external sound source to for it to make noise. It will go on its own. And I think the way when Alessandro and I were working on it, the thing that he pushed for over and over again was that, obviously it's a kind of echo verb. It's not quite a reverb, and definitely not what you would expect from a delay line. So I call it an echo verb, kind of in the vein of some of the early reverbs where they were creating them with multi-tap delay lines and whatnot. But his whole thing, what Cortini kept pushing for, was for the echo to be a part of the synthesis engine, as opposed to the echo being end of chain on the instrument, as in like, oh, we have a synthesizer with a delay line at the end of it. So where the delay line is kind of makes it a little unique in that way. So for example, the delay controls are not at the very rightmost, the very end of the actual instrument interface. They're in the center. And then also circuit-wise, the delay line is not at the very end of the signal path either. The filter is actually, which would, and really actually more I think of it, there's a lot of things out of order. So typically you would have, you would have like your VCO, VCF, VCA, and then if you're lucky, a delay line at the end, obviously not on the mini Moog, but say something like the Korg, the Korg DW8000, VCO, VCF, really VCA standard delay line. So this would be more like VCO, VCA delay line, echo verb, filter. So kind of a strange rearrangement of things, and mostly just for the reason of creating something where the delay line is integral to the synthesis process. So much so that the blend knob originally did not go to full dry. And I only changed that after a few people kind of made a little bit of a complaint about it. I still don't know how I feel about it. For me, I don't know why you would ever want to run it full dry, but the option is there now. Mm-hmm. It was not originally, though.
So to what extent, so first of all, I would say that maybe one of the reasons why I imagine it as a processor is because, you identified it, which is I'm so used to seeing things go into like a specific left to right order that seeing that delay knob in the middle makes me say, well, this must be a delay, and so as making that delay or that echo verb be part of the synth engine, how much are you dependent then on like feedback within all that front end circuitry in order to sort of like make it have the sound it has?
There's a lot of feedback paths. And actually, in fact, that's been one of the biggest struggles in quality control testing for us, is how to, with a digital device, it's very easy. The feedback paths are coded, and if the
you can be precise, yeah, right,
yeah, exactly. It's either there or not. Either the firmware loaded and it's running, or it's not running. But in this case, there's any number of components that could be fractures or be placed improperly or something to where you might lose one of the many feedback paths. I think there's about 13. I'd have to go back and count, but there's like 13 different feedback paths happening inside there. And some of them are under voltage control with the decay parameter, but not all of them. Some of them are just hardwired, and then others are affected by other parameters on the device. So it is really hard to test them all, actually. And we actually had to develop this kind of weird set of test points that was quite frustrating. And it actually took quite a long time to actually come up with a testing procedure for it. So yeah, it does rely quite a bit on the feedback. Now that you mention it, there's feedback paths that go obviously all the way around, from almost the output back to the
filter.
Input.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but then there's also feedback paths that happen in front of the filter, feedback paths that happen inside the filter. So there's about 13 different ones, and they're all in different places. And they all kind of have different jobs. Like some of them are what create more like the more discernible repeats, the echoes, and others create resonances, like really short on the really short delay lines to give like the comb filtering. It kind of gives it more the smeary kind of reverberant quality as opposed to just being echo.
Right. So all of this, the process of developing this with Alessandro sounds like it would have been quite a task, because what you're talking about really extends a long ways past, can you take this and add this and then put it in a box? It seems like it's a lot. It is sort of almost like classic instrument building. And I'm wondering what was the process? Did you make modules and have a whole bunch of modules wired together and then use that? Did you mock it up in software? How did you make prototypes that could even test out some of the ideas that you guys were coming up with?
Yeah, well, so the first step was drawing it out just by hand. And we did this while I was in Berlin a few times for Superbooth, actually. And I would go to Alessandro's apartment and we would hang out and he would draw stuff and I would draw stuff. And we kind of came up with an idea for I guess a layout, like an ideal layout that could kind of fit a form factor that we were happy with. And kind of at that point, it was very pie in the sky, like anything's possible. And there was a lot of functionalities that didn't make it to the final version. And then there was a point where I just had to kind of jump right in, and I used a breadboard, actually, several breadboards. It was 3 breadboards, and it was just a mess of jumper wires. I'm sure you're familiar with these. Yeah. Kind of plug them in. They're almost like miniature patch cables, except they don't work as well.
They fall out way too easy. That's right.
Yeah. They're constantly, they're very intermittent. You bump the table and something comes undone. And at that point, Alessandro actually came to Asheville. I think it was for either 1 or 2 weeks. It was at least a week. It might have been a week and a half. And we would literally just sit in my office. And, obviously this is well before pandemic times. We would sit in my office and he would play it. And he would have comments about the sound or the functionality, and he would ask for things to be more or less, brighter or darker, longer or shorter. And then I would go and I would, literally be changing resistors and capacitor values and moving feedback loops around in real time, really. And then he would play it some more, and he would have more comments, and I would, move stuff around some more. And so that went on for a week and a half of just breadboarding, basically real time kind of performance / breadboarding. We had it hooked up into a set of studio monitors in the office, and he would just play it and listen and tell me about it. Tell me what he liked, what he didn't like, what it needed, what it was missing, what it had too much of, all the stuff. And so it was very, I guess there was just a very short distance between his feedback and the changes, because we could both be in the same room. And it was on a breadboard. Breadboards are awful things, obviously, but they're also amazing things.
But they're handy things. Yeah, right, exactly.
And then after the breadboard, so after that period of development, we were pretty close. I mean, we had something that there was enough there that I could commit it to a printed circuit board. And so I like to move as fast as possible from breadboard to printed circuit board for analog designs, just for the reasons mentioned. You can't really move them around too easily. So things like, hey, what does this sound like if we run it through this other thing? It's well, we'll have to bring that other thing here because I'm not going to put this in the car and drive to my friend's house because it won't work when we get there. So we committed as quickly as possible to a printed circuit board. And at that point, we could start mailing stuff back and forth between Berlin and Asheville, which takes a little longer, but has the advantage of him being able to use it in his studio with all his other instruments and over his monitoring system that he's accustomed to, right, and his mixer that he's accustomed to. So once we got him actual working units, we sent him those units and he could actually play them in his studio in his actual process. And then it comes a time of, thanking our FedEx basically for doing overnight shipping from Berlin to Asheville, where he would say, okay, this and this and this are great, but there's this problem with the external input. And we would say, great, we'll figure it out. Overnight him a modified circuit. He would overnight us the other prototype back. We'd modify that one, begin the whole process again. So there was a lot of FedEx overnight shipping at that point.
Right. Well, that's an interesting and amazing story. And it kind of, I was going to say initially that it's a break from how you work, except it's not, because this sort of collaborative thing is what you've been doing with Tom Erb for quite a while.
Exactly.
And so this is just sort of like extending it a little bit and maybe letting somebody else in the room, in the design room, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Tom is a wonderful collaborator, and the process is not really that different because, like Alessandro, he has strong aesthetics.
Right.
Tom has strong ideas about how things sound or should sound or how he will make them sound. And so there is a lot of, it's not just us saying, Tom, do this. It's us saying, Tom, do this, and him saying, that's not how I would quite want to do that. Let me tell you how I would like to do that.
That sounded very much like Tom, what you just said. The way you said that, that's great.
He has wonderful aesthetics. So
yeah.
The end results are great.
Right. I was just going to say, when you see the results, it makes it pretty easy to trust his vision, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Tom, the only thing I ever would fault Tom for is he always pushes everything to the upper limits. So any technology that we're using, if it can go to 110, he's at 109.9, at all times. He just pushes everything to the absolute maximum capabilities. He doesn't leave any window. So it's funny because every year new technology comes out, as you know, every year, and we'll adapt it from time to time. And then I'll always think we have more power for now. Once he gets this in his hands, we'll be waiting for the next bump hour.
Be anxious for the next, right? Yeah. In talking about Tom, some of the stuff that he came up with since the last time we talked, key among them is the Morphagene, which is kind of at the heart of an awful lot of people's modular studios now. But it really comes, it kind of extends the aesthetic of like the tape music culture and music concrete stuff that you kind of started with the Phonogene, but we actually discussed as part of our previous conversation that finding information about the old tape studios and music concrete was something that you ran across in the New York libraries and was really influential to you. Now you're at the point where you're actually making systems that are sort of like tape music studios in a box, right?
Yeah.
How does that feel, and how does that kind of aesthetic drive some of your design decisions?
Well, it feels awesome because it's something that I was excited about, and interestingly enough, I recently returned to actual tape loops briefly. I would say. I mean, well, it is incredibly fun and tactile to actually cut a loop and, to mark stuff up with grease pencils and then, live with the happy accidents that occur from time to time. But the whole process takes so much longer. What you can do with something like a tape and microsound, or, I mean, for that matter, countless Max devices, is just incredible. And so to have something that's physical, that has like the tactile feel of cutting loops on a tape machine, just because it is physical and there's buttons you can press and so on, but has also some of the benefits of digital sound manipulation, it's a great thing. It was definitely a goal of mine to create something like that. I didn't think I'd ever actually be able to do it, but it's great to have it. And it's fun it's just fun to play with. I mean, even if you're not creating music that you're going to try to, release into the world, you're just having fun cutting up YouTube clips that you sampled or whatever. I spent so much time just sampling, sampling the president or something, and just, patching her around and having fun with that. So, it feels wonderful. And as far as like design aesthetics in future designs, I think, that's a harder one. I feel like modular informed so much about, obviously, something like the tape and microsound or the Morphagene or the Phonogene. There was this idea, obviously granular synthesis has, existed in computer format for so long. But one of the things that I always felt was I could achieve really interesting results, but I always felt like there was something between myself and the digital audio. It never felt like I always wanted to just like kind of reach in and make something happen, but it was never quite as easy as that. And so I think modular kind of lends itself to that like really direct input from the human. This needs to be slower. Like, okay, reach in there, grab the very speed knob and slow it down. And so I think modular, like analog modular, informs things more than anything in what we do and what I think most of our contemporaries in Eurorack do, just because that's what makes it special is having all those patch points and the knobs and the buttons and making something very direct and fully able to be implemented by the human in real time, as opposed to something that has to be kind of pre-programmed or I guess something that lives behind that wall that is the computer screen. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because obviously computers can do a great bit more than any modular synthesizer system, but there's always still that wall, and you have to either embrace it and live with it, or you have to you have to walk away from it and get in front of a modular or something like that.
Well, I think there's actually a little bit to difference in physics too, right? I mean, a feedback loop in the analog world is just simply different than a feedback world in the digital world, you know? Yep. And so from that standpoint, there are differences that will always exist and will make, I think, analog always be an important part of music making in studios. Now, you are in the kind of unique position, I think, certainly from our listener standpoint, you are in a completely unique position in probably being able to have as large of a make noise modular system as you would like, right? But I'm curious, you kind of dropped a little hint there about cutting up tapes and stuff. Obviously, you're not just a pure electronics designer. You're a musician too. You bring the musician aesthetic to the designs that you make. What is music making like for you? What's your studio setup kind of like? Tell me a little bit about the music you make and how you do it.
Sure. Yeah. I find that I do obviously have a make noise system in there. I have a shared system, and then I have another case that's like a 7U case that has a bunch of the stuff that's not in the shared system. Quad multimode gate, Rix Mix, MMG, a few other things. And so that's like in one corner right now. This situation is that's in one corner with an ARP 2600 behind it. Mm-hmm. I really like the sound of the ARP. It has wonderful sounding, really snappy envelopes that I think pair well with the make noise system and with a lot of other modular sounds, I guess.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such beautiful snappy envelopes, and then I also love the dual spring tank that's in that machine is just a wonderful thing. Honestly, I spent a lot of patches are just running out of the make noise system into that end of the ARP to get that spring reverb. Sometimes even like verb into spring reverb. So that's one little corner right now. And then on the other wall, I have polysynths. I got kind of back into those last year. And I did a whole record that has a ton of polysynths on it. One of my favorite ones is the Oberheim OB8. Really, really like, and I haven't really ever found another one that I've played that has quite the drifty quality that has. And I kind of just play it like a piano, not well, but like a piano. I just like playing chords on it. I don't program it a whole lot. I have basically just the panel is always just live. I think it's called manual. Is what it is. You hit the manual button, and then the knobs are live, and it's kind of always on the same basic setup. It's just kind of like a bad analog synth emulation of a piano. It's real drifty, and the sustain is too long. So I really love that one. And then other stuff that I use a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff just comes and goes. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else is in there.
Well, other than your experiments with tape loops, do you use tape at all, or are you well entrenched in digital recording?
I fully subscribe to the DAW. So as of last year, I started actually recording again, and I hadn't really made music in over a decade, probably about 12, 13 years. So I was really far behind in where DAWs had gone to. Like the DAW to me was like originally it was, like a very primitive version of Cubase, and then followed by, of course, Pro Tools, because that's just what everyone used in the 90s and in the early 2000s, end of the 90s, early 2000s. And so Pro Tools it's a fine way to record, but it's a little bit, it's kind of just a digital tape machine.
Right.
And, I'd heard from our customers about Ableton Live quite a bit. So many of our customers use Ableton Live. And I was able to, because Ableton, I guess they like Make Noise because they've given us some installs to use for videos and stuff. And I got one of those installs and started learning about Ableton. And I kind of fell in love with it. It's such a wonderful software because it's sort of like a DAW that's designed like a synthesizer, if that makes sense. It's very fun to play. And I found myself, I don't really use any of the software synths or anything. I mostly just use the arrangement view, the window where you can see the linear view. I don't really ever use the other view. I only use the linear view. But I just find that once, you capture things, there's so much fun that can be had with them, with what you capture from the analog world inside the digital world using Ableton. So, and I've started to explore Max 4 Live as well, which is like this incredible, like alternate universe of like devices.
I was going to say, beware, man.
It's crazy. It's funny. I had like this crazy idea one day to hook up. I thought it was crazy. I was like, there's no way anyone makes this. I wanted to play a stack of 4 Zero Coast. You talked about, being an owner of Make Noise, I can have as much Make Noise as I'd like. So I borrowed 4 Zero Coast and I wanted to play them polyphonically. And I thought, I wonder if anyone's made a device that would let me do that with ease. I go search on the Max 4 Live library, and sure enough, there's a device. It was like $5. And it lets you set up, basically like round robin voice sharing amongst multiple MIDI devices. Right. And I created a polyphonic Zero Coast.
Oh, that's incredible. Basically, you made a Korg monopoly out of 4 Zero Coasts.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, that is exactly what it was, because it was like the monopoly in that you had independent controls for each voice, and they all could make them sound different, so that each note would play differently. But that's just kind of the wonderful thing about Ableton and Max 4 Live, and just being able to have some kind of crazy idea. And then it's almost like the software is out there to kind of help you achieve these crazy ideas. They might end up not really being good ideas, but at least you got to explore them.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to, and it's funny you mentioned that for you, Ableton feels like kind of like a synth. I feel like they've done something in their design where everybody feels a connection to some part of the software. So some people say, I come from using loopers, and there's a part of it that really feels like it was influenced by loopers. And other people say about synths, or other people say about, different functions. And I think it's really neat how it's the kind of a canvas that people can really take their experiences and kind of project it on there.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I have another friend locally here who is he's like a jazz saxophone player, but he loves loopers, and he has this whole Ableton set that he's developed, or I guess it would be session. I can't remember the proper terminology, but it's like when he brings up Ableton, he has this whole set of like crazy complicated looper. But when you see him recording with it, it works perfectly for him. It's like he has like a rack of loopers in front of him, but it's just on his laptop.
Yeah.
It works very well for him. But yeah, I think, Ableton, I guess, it kind of sparked me in a way. And I just have a lot of fun being able to capture things from the modular, or from whatever synthesizer, whatever instruments I have that are inspiring me at the moment. I like to change things up. So while the Make Noise system, I also have a tape and microsound system in there. And then, of course, I have the Strega Zero Coast Zero Control that sits on the right side of my desk. Some things don't change, but other things kind of come and go. Like there was a DX7 in there for a while. Trying to think of other things. I got some other modules that come and go. Right now, I'm really enjoying the noise engineering Reverb. and I'm not going to try to remember the name of it, but it's
yeah, I can never remember any of them. Right, exactly.
that reverb sounds wonderful. I've been enjoying that. Right now, there's also a digitone in there, which I really like. I've been enjoying that one quite a bit, but I don't use it. I don't use it as like a groove box as much as just as like a synthesizer, sure. And it always gets run out of the digitone into the modular or into the ARP. It sounds great running it into the ARP through the filters and the reverbs. And then I recently really got into, this is going to be super nerdy, but I had previously avoided it, but I got really into compression. So I've been experimenting a lot with different analog compressors. The difference between like outboard, like analog compression and doing compression inside of Ableton is pretty profound. And also I think recording with it in chain is kind of incredible. It makes you play the instruments a little differently, and you can really kind of focus on elements of the sound that you maybe wouldn't have noticed or would have been kind of lost previously. So yeah, like I have like some different, like a FET compressor, and I've got a dial bridge compressor that's really cool sounding. And so those things have kind of opened up the synthesizer sounds even more. And I think recording something like a digitone into like an Reverb, into like an ARP 2600 filter, followed by a spring reverb, into like a FET compressor, kind of starts to really get you sparked and like excited about the quality of the sound as well as the notes that you've chosen to play.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point too, which is compression is one of those things where I think compression after the DAC is so much different than before the DAC, and I think that I think it's when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, I want to put together a studio, and I want to do it all in a box. I'm like, for the most part, you'll probably do fine. But there are some things that you're going to miss out on, and the kind of tweaky mic pre and compressor things can really make an extraordinary difference in the quality of recording.
Yeah, and it can just excite you.
Exactly. It can make it enjoyable, right?
Like in recording studios, a lot of times I think like they'll record a vocal dry, obviously, but in the vocalist headphone mix, they'll put like a nice reverb or an echo on it. And it can kind of change how the singer will approach it. Right. I kind of feel like that's the same is true of recording synthesizers. If you get a sound and it's good, and then you make it even better before you record it, you might play it a little differently, and you might do something differently, or push the levels and push the envelope a little bit more. The first record that I finished, which I think will be coming out in March, but I haven't really heard anything from the label in a minute, so I should probably check in with them. For that one, it was all in the box. I didn't have any of these wonderful analog processors. So, but I did have lots of wonderful analog synthesizers around, and it was still extremely fun to make. And then I have a second one that's coming out this fall that I'm maybe a little more excited about, but just because it's like the more recent one, how it is.
Sure. Oh yeah. The latest thing you did is the best thing. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm like, that first record's terrible. I don't even want that to come out anymore. This is a good one. But then you record something 3 days later and you're like, no, this is good. All that other stuff is trash. I should just wipe my hard drive clean. This one track, this is the best thing ever. But yeah, the one that's coming out this fall was a lot of shared system and ARP. The one that's coming out hopefully this spring, but we'll see. That's the one that has a lot of that Oberheim OB8 on it, and yeah, I mean, I'll send them to you. You can check them out when.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to. What label is going to be releasing this?
The one that's this spring is supposed to be coming out on Adventures, which is an imprint that's run by our good friend Robert A. Lowe. He's also a wonderful musician himself and a synthesizer wizard. And then and this fall, it's an EP coming out on Important Records.
Oh, nice. Very cool.
And the one this spring is called Multiple Futures, and then one this fall is called Breakin' is a Memory. And they'll just both be under my own name. I tried to come up with like a cool artist name. It's just so hard, and I had so many bad ones, and it was fun thinking about it. But in the end, Rob Lowe was like, "Why wouldn't you just use your own name?"
Right.
Because it sounds a lot like Tony Orlando, famous singer.
Oh my! You're gonna have to have two backup singers. Then that would be a mess. So, in making your music, who are like your musical influences? Who are the people that you draw from for musical inspiration?
It would probably be really obvious when people listen to it. I mean, I'm a massive fan of like more modern artists. Obviously, Alessandro Cortini and Caterina, who is the Patterns of Consciousness record. I can still remember the first time I heard like the first four notes of that. It just my ears perked up, and it just captured my interest in such a powerful way. Let's see who else. I mean, I have to confess, I'm a massive fan of everything that Daniel Lopatin has done. Yeah, one of the folks at Make Noise, Jake Pugh, who's on our production crew, he kind of turned me on to One O Tricks Point Never, and I remember I had seen them at a Moog Fest or something. It was one of those. If it wasn't Moog Fest, it might have been the other thing that happened the year after Moog Fest that only lasted for 1 year. But it doesn't matter. I remember seeing them, and I just did not get it. Like this was like whatever 4 years ago or something. I just did not understand it. I was like, why are people like this? I don't get it. And then Jake loaned me a record. I think it's R+7, and it's just so good. I just went through the whole catalog, and it was one of those things. I was like, who is this guy? You know, end up listening to like the entire catalog over the course of like 2 weeks, which I guess is kind of a unique opportunity of our modern times, that you can find an artist you like and then somehow be able to listen to their entire catalog immediately.
I know it's hilarious you say that, because my recollection of like when I was in my teens is that I would get on somebody, and then it was a process of scouring my little corner of the world looking for the rest of the things. And it was hard sometimes even finding out what were the releases that people did.
Right.
Now it's not. Now you can just go to a streaming service and not only find out what they did, but hear it all immediately. It's really weird.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You didn't even know how many records a particular artist might have made. Right. And you might be surprised when you walked into a record store, you might find something that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, they made this? I've never even seen this before.
So getting back to the modular business, I'm a little curious about, again, talking about your design process. I am fascinated by people's stories about how they do design and stuff like that. And you've been really open about it. But one of the things that I went and listened to, before our interview, I went and listened to the interview we did in 2016. And one of the things that you talked a lot about was the influence of Buchla and Buchla design and Buchla ideas, getting pictures of the Buchla modules and like poring over them and imagining in your head what they must sound like. Now you have to be fishing beyond that. I mean, the Strega is a clear example. There is like no parallel of that in the Buchla world at all. And frankly, a number of the things like the Morphagene and the Mimiphone and stuff like that, there's no equivalent. So you're obviously stretching beyond what you poured over in Buchla documentation, right? What is it now that you find inspiring? What are the things that you use to stimulate ideas, to get your kind of juices flowing, to get you revved up about the idea of doing a design?
Well, I think that was, and for the Strega, it was Alessandro. It was Cortini. And I think that he and I have discussed doing another project together, and that'll probably be the next big project that I work on, will be another project with him. And his vision of, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because what you're saying is that initially it was non-available hardware, legendary, mysterious hardware. Right. And it was, I mean, I don't think I was unique in that way. I think a lot of us were poring over these pictures. I know Scott Yeager over at Industrial Music Electronics, aka Harvest Man. He did the same thing. I mean, we would talk about it. We would talk about, what do you think this Buchla module did? You know, like there wasn't, you know,
it's a Marf. What's a Marf? It's got to be amazing, right?
How does a Marf work? What is it? You couldn't. There was no videos. There was no manuals. So but those things look incredible. You know, you see a picture of it, and you know, your heart starts beating faster. You're like, wow. You know, the blue knobs, like the fonts, everything about it, just gorgeous. So you're like, oh, but you've never used it. You never even stood in the same room as it. So it had this mystery to it. And now, of course, also there's a lot of, you know, you can own a Marf clone that's pretty close to the original, and you can play one. And I've actually had the opportunity to play some of the originals, thanks to Alessandro, letting me hang out in his studio and play with an original music easel or an original 200 system. And so I think, yeah, maybe a little, like, I'm not looking to you know, obscure hardware anymore. I think I'm looking to someone like an artist like Alessandro, or in some ways, I think Tom and I are kind of trying to figure out, you know, where we're going to go next, where we're going to seek inspiration from. Yeah, it's a long process with him and I, especially right now. I think because he's quite busy at school due to the pandemic. Right. I think a lot of responsibilities fell on him as far as like getting remote learning set up. If you can imagine.
Every academic I talk to is like stressed out of their gourds right now because of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, he's a smart guy, and I think probably some people are relying on him to make stuff work at times. That's my guess. But yeah, we are kind of, it is. I think that's a really interesting question, because I can't give you a 100% certain answer. I think I am currently searching. And I think part of that search has been returning to the actual music making process that brought me to modular in the first place. And I've spent the last year, I mean, I record almost every day now. Whereas prior to that, I mean, like I said, I had over a decade of, I didn't even have an audio interface in my room. I just didn't record. Making music was more something I would do in my office while I was developing a new product. And I did it often. I mean, I'm always making sound. I'm always making noise in the office. But there's a difference. You know, there's a difference between staying up until 2 a.m. trying to capture the perfect take of some sound that you've created on a synthesizer, and, you know, hanging out in your office trying to make a circuit work as well as possible.
Right.
They're both musical. They're both musical endeavors, but I feel like our customer base, the people who are using Make Noise, are probably more likely to be up until 2 a.m. trying to figure out how to get the perfect capturing of that sound that they created. You know, it's just, that's why they bought the Make Noise in the first place. That's why they bought the synthesizer in the first place. So I'm kind of returning to that, and I'm finding that that's kind of guiding me quite a bit. And I'm kind of, I'm borrowing every instrument that I can. I just borrowed from a friend of mine. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of friends in music. We do swaps. A friend of mine up the road, he has a studio in town. It's a wonderful studio called Drop a Sun. He's actually recording actually, I probably shouldn't say who he's recording right now. I'm not supposed to. But we always exchange stuff. So right now he has my PPG, and I have his Moog 1. So I'm exploring a Moog 1. Yeah, we do fun stuff like that. And I find that that's kind of, you know, that's kind of going at things from a musician perspective, once again, is kind of rekindling my interest in a big way. And I'm also, I want to work with some more musicians. I want to work some more with Cortini. And I have ideas for other people that I want to work with, and they don't know it yet. But
well, they'll all be waiting for your call now. Everybody who has imaginations, right?
Well, I don't want to get, I like to move on things when I feel like they can actually be moved on. One thing I was a little concerned when I was working with Cortini is that it took a long time. And I was always concerned throughout the whole process that at some point he was just going to say, I was going to call him on the phone, and he was going to say, you know, Tony, it's done. You're taking too long. I moved on. I mean, because it was taking so damn long. And then, but, you know, the cool thing is that he didn't say that. You know, he was committed to seeing it through. And I think it was probably hard for him, because I think he probably learned a lot about just how many steps go into bringing an instrument to the market. For when you're on the receiving end, you're like, oh, this wonderful thing has arrived. And you're not seeing all and I'm sure it's the same with, I know it's the same with software. Right. When the new version comes out, everyone goes and immediately downloads it and loves it. And you're thinking they don't know about the months and months and years potentially that went into bringing that to that page where they can click and install.
Well, it's interesting though, because Alessandro he's pretty particular about who he supports and who he backs up, and he has been very open and very noisy about how much he loves both this instrument and how much he loved this collaboration with you. So it was clearly a fantastic experience for him as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I was glad. I was definitely, like I said, I was worried at times. It's a different place for a musician to be in the world of design and manufacture.
Yeah, so true.
It's a very different place. There can be some moments that are crushing. When you have to tell someone, if we do this, it has to be twice as big and twice as expensive. Right. And we don't want it to be twice as big and twice as expensive. There's like a lot of times where you have to think about things in a way that's just not as fun. It's not as beautiful and it
has to be practical. Yeah.
Exactly. Practicalities come into play. And as much as I would like to ignore those things, I think at the end of the day, I think the people who like Make Noise, the customers, the artists that use it are going to appreciate it. Even if they don't know about it, they will appreciate it, because it's the whole reason why it ends up landing in their studios a lot of times. Right. Is that the practicalities that we take into account in order for something to actually be available.
Well, man, I blew past our time
limit. I know. Sorry.
Already. No, that's cool.
That's my rambling.
No, it's just the opposite. I could do this about like 5 hours longer. So we've just really started, but I'm going to have to wrap it up. So we're going to have to. Hopefully, it's not going to be another 5 years before we talk again. For Christ's sake. But it was so good to talk to you. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. It's good to chat with you. Always fun.
All right. We'll talk to you later then. Bye.
Yeah, take care.
Many thanks to Tony for having the great chat about everything, really. It's great to hear about the development of the Strega. It was also really interesting to hear about his musical projects and how he approaches that stuff. So fantastic insights into where Tony's coming from. I want to thank you all for listening, continuing to share this with your friends and family. And for those people that have been reaching out and touching base with me with ideas about people to interview, I've been chasing down a bunch of those. It's been going great. And just in general, giving me props, I really do appreciate it. If you can, please jump over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Darwin Gross, DARWINGROSSE. And if you can, please support the podcast, or at least sign up for the blog so you can hear about me when I talk about stuff. So with that, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time around. Bye.